I truly believe this revolution of AI is real, and there is a lot of benefits and a lot of practice that we can take and will be taken in the future across the globe. If you will try to solve it without Google or any LLM model, and it will take him 15 minutes, and he could solve it with 1 minute by querying Google, I will ask him, why didn't you use the tool that you have? Because you're wasting time, you're wasting money.
Guy, welcome to the Objective Hiring Show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, Tim. It's nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's absolutely our pleasure, Guy. And I was thinking about where we could start our conversation today. And where I think would make sense is to have a discussion about AI in hiring, because AI is taking over the world. Is that the right way to put it? I'm not sure. They used to say that software was eating the world. So AI is doing something to the world. I don't know what. But it's certainly having a big impact. And yeah, it'd be interesting to chat about it in a hiring context. So I'd love to know, have you started to experiment with any AI in the hiring process? Have you seen candidates on their side start to use AI? I'd love to get your initial thoughts there.
So first of all, I will just say that as a experienced AI and ML developer, I also graduated my master degree in AI and ML. So I truly believe this revolution of AI is real, and there is a lot of benefits and a lot of practice that we can take and will be taken in the future across the globe. And specifically in one bit, currently, we are not using AI in our hiring processes, mainly because our recruitment pace is quite low. We are a fast growing startup, but still we are around 100 people. So we are not recruiting on a daily basis. And also the pace of, or the amount of CVs that we are getting is quite low reference to relatively to bigger companies. So we don't have the painful process enough. It's not painful enough for us to establish an automatic process of new technologies. I do believe that AI has great value in these processes, like screening resumes and matching candidates to job descriptions. And these tools can save us a lot of time, a lot of effort, and ensure consistency. However, they must be carefully calibrated to avoid bias. And we already saw some examples, I guess all of us in the AI world, of embarrassing bias and a comparison between person and other animals or stuff like that. So it needs to be taken into account and be sure to have a fair consideration of diversity of the candidates.
And what about on the candidate side? Have you started to see them dabble, for example, in, I don't know, creating CVs or maybe trying to get some interview assistance with ChatGPT? What have you seen so far?
Yeah, so I already see some sparks of using ChatGPT to write the resumes. I can see similarity between resumes of different people. If it's it's mainly in the context part, ChatGPT can't invent experience. It can invent terms, but it will design your experience in the right approach to pass the automatic test. And also, I already heard about some new hacks that candidates are using. They are trying to hack the system because they know that AI bots are going to screen them. And for example, they are writing additional text in white color that people can't see, but bots can. So for example, if I'm a candidate for an AI solution or AI job, sorry, and I know that the chatbot will pass me if I will have 6 years of experience, and I have 4. So in white words, in white text, I will write 6 years, and then the chatbot will move me to the next level, next step, right? So I already heard about stuff like that.
It's funny how circular things are, because that was like Google search engine optimization 1999 tactic. And now it's coming to, I don't know what you call this, AI ATS optimization 2024, to some beautiful circularity with these tactics that takes place.
So I think like what it's even more funnier is that the AI bots are going to talk between themselves because the people are going to use them in order to write the CVs, and they are disqualifying or not the CVs. So they are going to optimize the same thing on the same time. At the end, it might happen that the CVs will be the same for people that use only AI bots.
Yes, it's going to be some weird AI versus AI battle. It's what is also interesting thinking about it now is this kind of intermediate period where for most companies at the moment, it's still a human reading a CV or humans reading the CVs to make the decisions. So candidates probably shouldn't be optimizing for an AI reading their CV now. But yes, that will presumably very quickly switch and change, as I feel like it's inevitable that companies would have to implement this, especially in some markets. Like I've spoken to so many people recently in the United States and Europe, and their application volumes are outrageous. Like some companies in America would get 1,000 in a day easily. I guess the Israeli market is probably slightly different in that regard at the moment, because it's just a contained market and maybe people from overseas aren't applying for jobs there as much as what they would in Europe, for example. I'd like to get your thoughts on that. Um, but basically, the companies are going to have to start doing this AI CV screening. Now, one issue I think is, though, no matter how good this screening is, it's still the data set you're using to do the screening is still a CV which is now maybe even less accurate than it was before because it's been written by ChatGPT. So, like what state are we going to get into? Like how accurate can it be when the data set itself is pretty cracked? What do you think?
Yeah, and mainly if CVs are still relevant or not to today's world. I will start by talking for a second about the Israeli market and the amount of applications. So I will give our company in one bit as an example. Although we are in the Israeli market and most of the developers are from from Israel, still we are working globally and we have employees also in Russia and in Europe and in US, and we are open to candidates. But I totally agree that the amount and the traffic of candidates that apply from their own, like they push it from their side, is quite low. And although we are starting to publish it and market it more in Europe as well. So maybe it's matter of traffic and focus of us. Like we are focusing on the Israeli market in terms of developers, and maybe if we will focus across the globe, we will get more CVs as well. On the CV side and the relevancy of the resume in today's world, I don't think that CV is dead. I think it does need a significant evolution. On one side, CVs are optimized by ChatGPTs and other Gen AI tools such that the text is better worded and sounds amazing. But like I said before, from the other side, the actual experience and skills won't change by this optimization, and it will be still possible to distinguish between candidates. In addition, I think that resumes have a significant impact on the later stages of the hiring process. So besides the screening phase, which is crucial, and it's the main painful part for most of the companies to screen thousands of applications per day, but still the CVs will be a crucial in the next stage. It's usually used to review projects, skills, and mutual interest between the interviewer and the candidate. So if you want to have a resume, you will need to tell me that in the beginning, and I will need to think about it on real time instead of before the meeting. And so I don't think it's dead, but I think that precisely because of the use of AI, I do believe that CVs will become more narrow and will contain only a closed list of skills per job type. Like this is my dream. I really like classification and categorizing stuff. It's makes life easier. And I think with LinkedIn these days, it's even easier to see that let's take a role, for example. Let's take data analytics. So instead of people describing in words what skills they have, there will be a closed list that they can check. Okay, I know SQL, I know this database, I know how to develop dashboards, and then it will be even easier for the AI solution to distinguish the real needs.
And I guess also part of the use case or benefit of large language models is they're quite good at taking unstructured data and making structured data out of it. So it might still be candidates applying with a CV and some other wordy themes, but then the large language model can then convert that into the structured data to then do some kind of ranking. Is that how you would see it working?
Actually, I didn't think about it, but it sounds like a cool and great solution. We can use AI in order to do that as well. Yeah. Like, even not related to Gen AI, there are AI solutions like clustering and we can find similarities and non-similarities between candidates. So maybe, you know what, maybe I will implement it here later. Maybe we can create an AI and ML model that will cluster all similar candidates into groups, and then I will look for the outliers. I will ask him, give me the one that is not like the others. And for him, I will explore his CVs.
That's an interesting thought. So let's unpack that a bit more. So because you're thinking that everything's going to be condensed and everything's going to look more and more similar, you almost want the people who are a little bit outside the box or outliers on some dimension. What would there be? I'm just thinking about it now. Would there be like a good and a bad outlier in a way? Like depending on which side of the distribution it's on, like what would you be looking for in those outliers, do you think?
That's a good question. So, it's like there is no bad publicity. So maybe there is no bad outlier. Like in this case, I would like to have someone that is not using the most common way and is thinking out of the box, maybe to distinguish himself. Still, of course, you need to pass all the minimum requirements and skill set and whatever we defined in the job description. But if everyone is writing the same thing using the chat, the same AI bots, I can't distinguish between. And maybe the one that will write is additional paragraph that will distinguish him. This is the guy I want. Maybe, I don't know, but it will help me to identify these specific persons out of thousands, for example.
Thinking of it from a slightly different perspective now, but the same thing. So from the candidate's perspective, at the moment, again, especially in markets like Europe and North America, they are going to LinkedIn. They're seeing a data analyst, a data scientist role. They're seeing, wow, 1,000 applicants in a day. Are you kidding me? And they're thinking to themselves, oh my God, I thought I had to apply to 50 jobs to get one interview. Now I probably have to apply to 500 to get one interview. So then they're applying en masse, which is then causing this vicious cycle problem where there's just more and more applications, which is then causing their application to be lost in the sea of noise, if you can call it that. For these candidates, if they want to stand out as a candidate, as opposed to you finding them standing out, how could they stand out, do you think, in that application process? Do you have any thoughts?
That's a big challenge. And honestly, I faced the same challenge a few years ago. And what I try to do is to create a CV, a specific CV for each kind of a job. And I like manually handcraft the CV for different positions that I submitted to. I don't really think there is a solution unless people will, you know what? Maybe from the job perspective, from the company perspective, there can be an automation that will write how many CVs there are already in line, in queue. And then the set of expectations will get lower. And then if I will, as a candidate, I will see, okay, there are 40,000 CVs that are waiting for review before mine. I won't even comply. I won't even apply. And then again, it's a cycle. So the number of CVs will go down. and I will apply for the most commonly, or maybe we can tell them in percentage, what is the chance to get to my CV will get examined in the next few days. It will give me an hope, an hope.
Yeah, you've touched on something I think really important there that I feel like AI could drastically improve, and that is just the transparency of the process. I feel like the way hiring's done, maybe because it's so manual, it's so tedious, I feel like we're not really in a position to measure things as part of the process and then share those metrics. So yeah, something as simple as like average time from applying to reviewing. Has my application been reviewed yet? How long did someone spend reviewing it? Who was reviewing it? What did they like about it? Like all of that is so manual at the moment, it's never really going to go anywhere. But if an AI was doing those first few steps and that information could be shared with anyone, that could be shared internally, that could be shared in an HR tool, that could be pinged to the candidate. There's just so much upside, I think, from moving to some clever automation in these early stages for sure.
So I think even not related to AI solutions, with today's technology, there can be a lot of automations of data processing and data analysis to show these kind of things. And even if I do it manually, I can still log how much time it was being processed, right? Or waiting for me. And it can be reviewed by the platform that I'm using, if it's LinkedIn or whatever I choose.
You're right. And maybe that then makes me think, why hasn't that already been done? So let's just take that as an example. At the moment, in an applicant tracking system, a human is sitting there, opening up a CV, looking at a CV, clicking reject. Like that is obviously, you can track all of that, but it isn't at the moment. Like if I think of the ATSs I've used, they're not, in some cases, not tracking that at all, at least not visible to you as a user, and they're certainly not sharing it with the candidates. So I wonder if the companies aren't demanding that. Maybe they don't want that level of transparency. Maybe they're worried about that. I don't know. It's an interesting idea to think about.
I personally don't know why I didn't do it, but I think that for companies with thousands of applications per day, it's even a good perspective for the HR departments to know what is the traffic and to know what is the processing time and how good is their process, right? And how good is their feedback to the applicants. I guess the HR department care about how much time this person is waiting, and it's their client, by the way. The candidate is a company client, as per se. So you want to give a good service or not? If you ever give a good service, you can get a perfect publicity. Also, because of that, I think it's just not important enough for the candidates. For the technical persons in the companies, and I don't think the HR department has enough power and influence to open a project like that, because it will involve technical and data guys to develop this streaming process or this analysis process, and it will require justification, which is not easy. Now there is specific budget for different developments, and maybe they don't see the value on that.
Yes. I would also argue, though, in theory, the applicant tracking systems, the HR tech that companies buy, should have this functionality. The fact that they don't have it, even though we both know it's technically pretty easy, must mean that people aren't demanding it. Now, this leads me on to another thing I want to talk to you about, which is maybe the fact that talent and HR teams and the leadership in those teams very rarely would be from technical backgrounds, very rarely would be, came up through machine learning or data science or software engineering or hard sciences. Typically not. They'd come from other areas of the business, including sometimes HR specialists. So is it the fact that they maybe don't have that kind of scientific, analytical experimentation lens means that they aren't thinking about these problems in the way that a data person would, a software engineer would? What do you think?
I think it does pose a challenge, like especially when evaluating highly technical roles. collaborative hiring where technical leads and talent teams that work closely can bridge this gap. For example, like upskilling talent teams with basic data literacy can also improve hiring outcomes. In one bit, for example, for specific roles, we cooperate between us, the data department, and other departments, the R&D and the more developers kind of tech leads to assess candidate skills when needed. For example, I review the CV of a data engineer. I also ask the VP R&D to have a specific, like, to share his feedback together with me because it's collaboration between data and development skills. So also for other candidates, it's relevant. In my opinion, there is a huge jump during the last few years in the development skills of data developers. So since there are bigger expectations from them to work with common best practices like Git and other code development, so I do believe that this gap will get smaller and smaller in the future.
The other angle I was thinking about recently was when I'd spoken to marketing analytics people who had been involved in hiring at scale in their company. It was very interesting how they took a very marketing funnel lens to hiring. And to me, the hiring funnel is no different to any other lead funnel. Like you get a bunch of people at the top, they eventually filter down through some conversion gates until you hire one or you sell something. And it was interesting to see how perfectly they'd applied their marketing hat to the hiring hat. Another example is a company that works with us, Agoda, a travel company based in Southeast Asia. They have, within their marketing hiring, they've applied all their marketing principles to hiring. And so they have all these metrics they capture internally, including things around like interviewer performance. How many interviews have you done this week? How effective a screener are you as an interviewer? So for example, if you consistently interview people and then in the next round, they all get rejected, you're not really an effective gate. And so they have kind of hacked together all these metrics themselves that they built on their own back because they've got engineers, they've got the marketing brains, they can kind of combine those together. But I wonder again whether if there was more of these other skill sets in talent teams, they would then be demanding this as basic functionality from the ATS providers because they would have their marketing hat, their analyst hat, their science hat. And so maybe there's a lack of that diversity of hats in talent. What do you reckon?
I think the lack of talent sets in the processes, like what you described in Agoda, seems like a really healthy process and like personal review of their processes. And I guess it came from and like a retrospective of not very good hiring for the last few years, and then they said, okay, how can we gate it better? So we will add another feedback or another analysis on this kind of stuff. Maybe what's needed here is a collaboration between some analytics developers with the department that is in charge of the hiring. Usually it's the HR. And maybe there they can think together on what is the KPIs? What are the KPIs for the hiring process? How do you know if it's good? How do you know if you need 3 or 5 interviews? How do you know if the people that are joining or that you already selected kind of after the first interview is good enough against the other that was like on the last minute, like they competed with the other candidates? How do you measure it? So first of all, we discussed it before, we need to gather this data, right? As a data person, I can tell we want to gather as much data as we want, and then we'll decide how to analyze it. So first, we need to automate this kind of stuff, and hopefully all these HR platforms are going to do it automatically for us. And later, we will just need to justify and define the KPIs in order to analyze it. And it will close the loop as I can see it.
Yeah, I hope so. And this is why I'm so excited about the next few years, because I feel like in, let's say, the recruitment hiring space, we're at a very nascent stage in the way we think about it. and the kinds of questions that we would ask if we were looking at marketing or sales, the kinds of basic BI questions we would have an answer to immediately, we don't really have in hiring most of the time. Maybe in certain situations or bigger companies who do it at a high scale, but like, if I asked the typical hiring manager or business, like, what was the conversion rate per step? What's the average number of days it takes from a person to apply to get hired? What's the biggest bottleneck in the process? Who's done the most interviews? Who's the most effective interviewer? Like pretty basic questions that I don't think anyone would be able to answer because we just don't have the data or the systems or whatever to answer those. And so I think maybe with AI, because it could automate a bunch of annoying, shitty things, maybe we'll have enough time to now think about these other problems. Maybe that's going to be the breakthrough, hopefully.
Yeah, that's an amazing approach and a great way to think forward. Like, I don't see a reason why not to do so. Also, it impacts the current managers or team leads that do all these interviews and kind of frustrated by talking with more and more people. And of course, they want to do it they want to find the perfect candidate on the first, right, on the first shot. And you also can get feedback from them. And yeah, you can optimize these processes by a lot.
Yeah, I think you can. And what we've been describing, I would say, is almost a bit like data-driven hiring, or at least data-informed hiring. And if I think back to the last 5 or 6 years, I've spoken to probably 1,000 data leaders in that time-ish. And what struck me was something really interesting that I'd love to get your thoughts on. And that is that when it came to actually making the hiring decisions, I would say probably 80% of these data leaders would use a very intuitive based approach, a very gut feel based approach, rather than any data. And I find that kind of curious because these are data leaders who spend all their day running product analytics, sales analytics, machine learning, whatever. And then when it comes to hiring, they just change all of that and use intuition. Have you seen that? What's your thoughts on that? And why might this happen, do you think?
That's totally a funny topic, and it's true. I will start by saying it's true, and most of the people, by the way, not only data, but especially it's funny in the data field, still use gut feeling. I think that people often rely on gut feeling because hiring is fundamentally about trust and culture fit, which can feel subjective. When a manager is interviewing some candidates, he doesn't only think about his set of skills. He also examines if the candidate fits the environment and the culture of his team, of the company, of the stage of the company, like between startups and well-based companies. And specifically in the data field, most of the jobs, besides maybe data engineering, combines both technical skills, not both, also technical skills, domain knowledge, and analytical thinking, which is so hard to evaluate and quantify. So therefore, usually there are more than one answer for an analytical question, and which make it harder to quantify the accuracy. I believe that it must be combined. Some of the tasks should be totally quantified and technical, while the others should represent the candidate's ability to deliver its solution in a good way. Okay, for example, I can present a specific analytical solution in 2 different dashboards, which you will say the first one is perfect, and I will say, oh, I don't understand nothing here, and the other one looks much better to me. So at the end, it also depends on the hiring, the team lead, or the current analytical thinking of the company. No, if it fits the strategy.
Is there something to be said then for minimizing how much of the criteria are inherently subjective and focusing more on the objective bits so that you have a more kind of consistent, accurate way of hiring? Or if we did that, would we just miss out on things that are important that are important, but we just can't measure that well.
I think it's super important, and you can't ignore that. Like part of it, it's also the creativity of the candidate, like to think outside of the box and to show you some ideas or present you some ideas that you even didn't think of. Because when you, let's compare it to a developer technical test, okay? So there is probably an optimized solution for this task, and there are like minor changes or medium level solution, but you can very easily put it in scale. But when an analyst or a data scientist will share with you their thoughts, that might be like out of range. You didn't even think about it when you designed the question, right? You don't have the full set or full list of solutions that might come up in the interview. So usually during the interview, you can already feel if the candidate is go straight forward to the most binary and default solution, or is also thinking and challenge you or challenge the current solution that you have in mind, which is from like personally, this is a bigger trigger for me. Like if he challenged me and he's saying something that I didn't think of, because I already familiar with the challenge, I heard a lot of solutions. This is a bigger trigger for me, like to move on with him to the next step.
It's almost like an X factor that might not be in your criteria if you're writing them down, but it's something out of left field that shows they're a little bit higher than the other candidates in some ways.
Yeah. Also, it's very subjective because if there are few team leads that are part of this hiring process, maybe I didn't think about the solution, but the other guy already think about it. So it's not X factor for him, but it's X factor for me. So if the same candidate was interviewed on his side with him, so it wouldn't pass.
Is there something to be said for even if some of the criteria or a lot of the criteria are inherently subjective? So let's take, I don't know, a data analyst as an example. Maybe you need them to have some solid statistics knowledge, I don't know, some visualization skills, some SQL, some Python, but then good communication skills, problem solving, creativity. So you've got like a blend of more objective and less objective criteria. But even with that, is it not possible for those subjective things that if you thought enough about them, let's say communication, if you really thought like when we say good communication, what do we mean? Oh, okay, that means, you know, they listened carefully to what I was saying. They gave a succinct answer. They gave an answer that I could understand. It was very clear. Like you could probably break down what it is to have good communication by your definitions and then score people against that. So even though it's still someone's opinion over how well they did, at least it's like in a kind of box, you know, that you've reduced the subjectivity a lot. What do you think of that approach? Do you think that would work, or is that too limiting?
So I will stick with my answer from before. I really like, as I said, to classify stuff and narrow the open world or the open idea into classes. And I think it will help here as well. Like if I can just, as an interviewer, put like checkbox and mark V if I think he is a good listener, or if I think he understood the solution, understood the problem. So it will help me to quantify at the end, and or at least know what set of skills he do have, like not technical ones. But still, it will have a level of objectiveness inside it, because I can interpret a person listening mode, or if he understood, I think he understood the solution or the problem, while the other teammates didn't. So it will stay like that. Maybe, you know what? Maybe in the few years forward with AI and the chatbots that will interview by themselves, maybe they will be able to quantify it better.
Yeah, maybe. I was talking to someone about this recently, and one thing we were thinking about was, so there's definitely at the moment things that we would understand and pick up on immediately as humans that an AI won't. Obviously, there's lots of those. what's interesting maybe is to think about the opposite. Like, are there going to be extra data points that we're not cognizant of that an AI is? It could start to be measuring flickers in eyes and, slight movement of the head. And maybe that indicates something we figure out after years. And so I'm fascinated to see where this goes. You're an expert in this field. Can you imagine an AI interviewer in the next few years picking up on data points that even we're not aware of?
Yeah, I think like for both sides. First of all, I do imagine, and I guess there are already experiments with AI bots that interviewing people. I didn't hear about, but I guess there are. Um, I think it's a problematic approach because at the end, this person will join the company and come to work with people and not with AI bots. And also the experiment of talking with someone and try to solve a challenge together with him. It's very much, it's so important for a good candidate to move forward, which won't be able to to accomplish or achieve using AI bots. I do think regarding your point that analysis of the AI or the video, eyes movements or head movements, stuff like that can be an additional parameter and metric for me after the interview to raise an alert. Did you notice that this candidate didn't look into your eyes or something like that? And okay, I will say, oh yeah, I did notice or I didn't, but it did affect my decision. Because you usually you're getting the decision, you decide if to move forward after the meeting. So you can have a summary of the AI decision taking and take it into account. Another thing, sorry, I I see another cycle, problematic cycle. If AI bots will interview only, like without a human being, I can, from the candidate side, I can put an AI bot for myself, and he will interview him. I can just act the system again, which is another problem.
Yeah, that's going to be fascinating. Oh, wow. How's this going to play out? One other angle I was just thinking of then actually is one of the, I feel like, most fundamental issues we have in hiring is in the interview stage, people aren't really themselves. The candidate isn't really giving you themselves. The interviewer is not giving you the full picture of themselves or the company. Like there's this little charade dance mask thing going on, which I feel like limits how accurate any interview could ever be. Now, what I'm also wondering, thinking about it now, is if candidates start to interview with an AI interviewer, maybe their behavior will change again. Maybe it will be more realistic, less realistic. I don't know. But that's interesting. Like I find myself at the moment, if I have a conversation with ChatGPT, I find it very easy to receive its feedback. You see what I mean? Like I ask it for feedback on what I'm doing well, what I'm not doing well. I find it fine. I can accept all the criticism in the world from them. I find it harder to receive criticism from a human. And so I already realized that I interact with AI differently to humans. So I'll be fascinated to see how that plays out in interviewing. What do you think will happen?
It's an interesting question because personally, I think that there is a lot of value when you see the candidates getting stressed or don't know the answer, like to your question, and how we react to it. It will reflect you on specific use cases doing the day-to-day job, and I see it valuable. Like I know that AI can summarize it and try to just do it, but I don't know if it can put more stress when it is or reduce the stress when needed. Like it need to be more human, and maybe maybe in the future it will. But also another approach that I noticed and I experienced in the past, which I really liked in the later stage of the process, instead of doing the last interview or one before interview in a meeting or in 1 hour session, I was called to have 5 hours of daily job in the company to feel the environment, to see the actual task that the team is facing, and also for them to see how I react to new stuff and how I react to the business and what is the environment, culture, and how good fit in terms of personal connection with other teammates. I really like it, and maybe we can include this kind of a step in a more narrow way. I'm thinking about it personally.
Yeah, I think anytime you have a step in hiring, the closer it is to the real job, the more accurate it is. So that's why I think an interview is like not that predictive. Then you give like a take home project and then a presentation that's a bit closer. And then what you're saying is the next step, which is actually work effectively for 5 hours. I know McKinsey used to have like the 40-hour interview idea from years ago. I don't think they do it anymore, where they get you in for a whole week, which is the next end of the spectrum. I guess that's going to be too difficult. Yeah.
I think maybe, you know what, maybe we can use AI and automation to do a simulation of a day-to-day job. And then the candidate can do it on his own time. It's not affecting anything. And maybe with virtual reality, you can feel the environment in the office. Uh, I have many ideas in this field, but it's far, far from accomplished.
Yeah, there's definitely something in that. What I assume will happen with AI is it'll probably start to get used, I think, from the top of the funnel down. So maybe like CV screening first, and then like a first basic interview, and then it might be like an interview assistant with a human, and then eventually maybe the full thing. Because it's probably, I reckon, going to be more accurate at doing those basic CV versus job ad comparison at scale than a human is. But it's going to be much worse at the moment at doing the actual, do I want to work with this person or not, kind of high touch interview. And so if we can just automate at least 80% of the bullshit, then it could be more like a value add as a sort of, like, I'm just trying to think now, like if an AI was sitting in on an interview with someone, it could do obviously the transcription, the summarization, the getting ready, the feedback notes for the candidates, like that's already current with like current technology. It could also do things like evaluating the interviewer, like, hey, did you realize you were making the candidate stressed at this point, or this question you asked seemed a little bit biased, you might want to think about this, like kind of friendly feedback for interviewers. That again should already be possible with the current quality of the technology. So maybe it's just a matter of time for the applications to be built.
I think it's also like a combination of what we discussed before. It can be a spectator of the actual human interview, like the later stage, and for sure it will help us screening and even take it further. It should analyze and quantify the technical skills, the technical steps. Right, you can examine the test and let you know which one you can score it automatically. It's not something difficult. But definitely it should take part of I think it already is taking part of the hiring process.
And what about then from the candidate side of things? So I feel like candidates so far have been quicker to adopt AI, as we've discussed, to write CVs or optimize CVs. Also, probably to get help with taking tests, either an online test or a take-home test. Have you started to change or rethink your hiring process at all based on the access to these kinds of tools?
Yeah, definitely. If in the past I put more focus on the SQL query that I challenge the candidate to write. Now I don't really care about it because also in the day-to-day job, he can use whatever tool he need in order to solve the problem. I don't care about it. I care more about the way the way he use the tools that he have, right? In the past, by the way, he could do it with Google query and find the proper solution. And I say, okay, it's fair. You have all the tools that are open for you. And I even like mark it down in the beginning of the test. I'm saying I tell them, use whatever available for you, just use it right. And I will examine how do you use it. If it takes you too much time to check with ChatGPT or search on Google or find the proper solution or debug the proposed solution, because the hallucination challenge with ChatGPT can get very frustrating sometimes. And more than that, did you understand the proposed solution or did you just copy it? So what I'm focusing on these days is giving them the challenge and then challenge them back on their solution. Why do you think this is the best one? Isn't there is an optimized way to do it? Why did it do that? And in addition to that, I also focus in, again, mainly in the analytical data roles on the business side. How much value do you think it will give? What other things you could do in order to justify the business KPIs or whatever?
I'm wondering if you've noticed a tendency with candidates who've used ChatGPT or any large language model to at least do the coding bit. Do you ever get the sense that they are now sort of almost palming off the responsibility? It's like, oh, well, this is what ChatGPT gave me, as opposed to them needing to own the fact that, yes, they've used a tool to generate it, but ultimately it's still their responsibility to write it. Have you noticed any maybe more junior candidates start to slip into that mindset?
Not really. I think they are shy. They are too shy to say that yet. Like, it's convenient to use it, but to blame it, it's another level. And at the end, you are responsible. You are the answer writer. So I didn't find it like, no.
And in your view, is there a difference between using something like ChatGPT on a skill that you don't know at all versus using it on a skill you actually do know to make yourself more efficient? So, for example, a candidate who'd never written SQL using it for SQL versus one who's an expert in SQL.
So it's again the same. It's quite of the same answer from before, because if I use it for something that I don't know, I won't understand the solution. And if I don't understand the solution, I can't explain it and I will catch it over there. But in any way, I do expect them to use the tools that are optimizing. Like if you will try to solve it without Google or any LLM model, and it will take him 15 minutes, and he could solve it with 1 minute by querying Google, I will ask him, why didn't you use the tool that you have? Because you're wasting time, you're wasting money, right? So it's also part of the things that I'm checking. Did you use the correct tool in order to do it? Maybe if it's it's technology that you're not familiar at all, maybe you will need to start to read the documentation of this tool before going to ChatGPT or the solution.
One other thing I'd love to ask you about is if you had the proverbial magic wand, could be AI, could be any other kind of magic you like. If you could, the click of a fingers, fix the hiring process, how would you do it? What would you do?
Oh, that's a nice thing to think about. I probably create a system that seamlessly integrates skill-based assessments, automated candidate matching, and real-time feedback while eliminating bias, which is most important for me because I'm very sensitive to this topic. It will also offer continuous learning opportunities for hiring managers and candidates. Like, both sides will benefit from it. The manager will learn what he needs to do better in order to hire or to interview the next person. And the candidate will learn where he felt wrong or where he answered wrong, and then he will improve his skills and will have better chances in the future. It will ensure alignment with evolving industry needs, because it's getting harder for bigger companies and smaller companies to hire people and know exactly the set of skills and the seniority level of a new recruitment.
That sounds like a great use of your wish or your magic wand. And I feel like we can't be that far off that. I don't think that's fantasy. I feel like that's 2025, 2026 products. I feel like we're already pretty close. So I hope you get your wish and your magic wand wish is granted. Guy, it's been an interesting and engaging conversation today. We've covered a lot of ground. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing all of your insights with our audience.
Thanks a lot, team. It was interesting and I had a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.